This weekend, the theme that we're exploring is this question of authenticity, right? The theme of the weekend is who do I say that I am? Which, of course, is kind of based on Jesus' question to his disciples of who do the people say that I am? Who do you say that I am? Right? But in some sense, there's another question there of like, who do we say that he is? And if we are Christians, then what does that mean for us? Like if we have a certain assertion about who Jesus is, what does that mean for who we see ourselves to be as his people, as the people who follow him? There's implications to this. So anyway, I'm really excited about exploring this idea of authenticity and like being real and all of this kind of stuff, because I think that these are really important kind of things that happen in our culture, right? Like we love to talk about like the people being real and like saying it like it is. And like, honestly, like, you know, we put someone in the White House because they say it like they see it, right? Like that was really the premise of, again, love him or hate him. But like Trump's in the White House because he spoke his mind and people liked it. They were tired of politicians lying to them and they wanted someone who was going to be real. And Trump fit the bill on that, right? I mean, again, love him or hate him. I'm not going to tell you what my politics are, but it is what it is. You get what you get with him. A few months ago, my daughter was reading Pinocchio for school. You guys familiar with this book, Pinocchio? I didn't even know it was a book. You know? Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's apparently like this collection of stories and stuff like this. Anyway, but that was all that I knew too. All I ever knew about it was the classic movie back from 1940, right? Really old movie. Let me give you a brief synopsis of it just in case you don't really remember how it goes. So once upon a time, there was a woodworker named Geppetto who makes himself a wooden marionette, little boy marionette that he names Pinocchio. And as Geppetto is going to bed, he wishes upon a star that Pinocchio will be made into a real boy because he desperately wants a son. That night, the blue fairy comes and brings Pinocchio to life. However, Pinocchio remains a puppet. He isn't changed into a real boy, but rather he simply remains a puppet. And the blue fairy tells him that if he ever wants to become a real boy, that he has to be brave, he has to be truthful, and he has to be selfless. And it's here that also he is given his friend Jiminy Cricket, who will be the boy's conscience, or at least the puppet's conscience, right? So, the next day, Pinocchio is doing like typical boy things, and he's on his way to school, right? We all get to go to school. School. And as he's on his way, he's led astray by a fox and a cat, and he's convinced that he needs to join a puppet show led by a ringleader named Stromboli. So he joins Stromboli's puppet show, and Pinocchio quickly becomes the star of the show. He's a marionette that is capable of dancing and singing without strings. I mean, could you imagine, like, if you saw a puppet that could just, like, dance freely without anything moving it? That would be crazy, right? But when Pinocchio finally wants to go home after he's done his dance and sung his song, by the way, he's totally ditched school to do this, right? Stromboli decides that he's going to lock Pinocchio in a cage, which sucks, right? Pinocchio is being put in the cage, and then when Jiminy Cricket is unable to free him, the blue fairy shows up to ask him why he isn't at school. Weren't you supposed to be at school, young man? Pinocchio then lies about why he wasn't at school. And anybody remember what happens when Pinocchio lies? Nose grows, right? Pinocchio at this point realizes that he's been caught in his lie. He promises to be a good boy. The blue fairy restores his nose, sets him free, and says, listen, dude, this is the last time that I'm ever going to be able to help you. The next time you're on your own. Okay? That's it. So he swears he's going to be good. Meanwhile, across town, the cat and the fox meet a coachman who promises to give them money if they help him find little boys that he can take to a place called Pleasure Island. Naughty little boys, especially. It's for the naughtier, the better. Encountering Pinocchio on their way home, the fox and the cat convince him that he should take a vacation to Pleasure Island. Right? You should just go. You deserve it. You've worked so hard. You skipped school today. That was a tough day. So on the way to Pleasure Island, Pinocchio ends up meeting a friend named Lampwick, who is also another delinquent boy. And so without rules or authority to enforce them, Pinocchio and the other boys at Pleasure Island soon begin in engaging activities like smoking and drinking and vandalism and all of this kind of stuff. They get drunk, and this is all to Jiminy Cricket's dismay. This poor cricket with a conscience. right? Who's like, no, don't do this. You promised the blue fairy. So eventually what happens is Jiminy decides that he is going to leave Pinocchio. Can't do it anymore, bro. I'm out. You're on your own again, right? But as Jiminy's trying to leave the island, what he discovers that the island actually holds a terrible curse. And that all of the boys who are brought to Pleasure Island are transformed into donkeys. That's what happens here. And then they're changed into donkeys for their misbehavior, and then they're sold into slavery. This is a horrible... this is a children's movie, guys. It's terrible. So Jiminy runs back to warn Pinocchio, only to discover that Lampwick has already been transformed into a donkey, and Pinocchio manages to escape the island, but he himself has also been partially transformed. Right? He's starting to grow donkey ears, he's got a donkey tail, all this kind of stuff. Upon returning home, Pinocchio and Jiminy find that his father's workshop is vacant. They get a letter from a blue fairy saying that Geppetto is actually... Geppetto has ventured out to sea to try to save Pinocchio. But he was swallowed by a giant sperm whale named Monstro. And now, Geppetto is living in the belly of Monstro. So determined to rescue his father, Pinocchio also jumps into the sea, accompanied with Jiminy Cricket. Pinocchio is soon swallowed by Monstro as well. The two are reunited in Geppetto's belly. And finally, Pinocchio devises a scheme in order to make the whale sneeze so that they can escape from the belly of the whale. Right? He lights a fire in Monstro's belly, and that kind of causes some smoke to make him sneeze. The scheme works, but the enraged whale then chases them and smashes their raft. Pinocchio is able to pull Geppetto to safety into a cave before Monstro crashes into it, ostensibly killing Pinocchio. Geppetto, Figaro, Cleo, and Jiminy Cricket all wash up safely, but Pinocchio is killed. Back home, Geppetto grieves over Pinocchio with Jiminy Cricket. The pets also mourn alongside of them. Typical Disney fashion, right? The blue fairy, however, decides that Pinocchio has finally proven himself to be brave, truthful. I'm getting so emotional about this. Brave, truthful, and selfless. And in order to reward him, I swear I'm going to get through it, the blue fairy resurrects Pinocchio and transforms him into a real boy. Pinocchio awakens, realizes what's happened. Jiminy steps outside to thank the fairy and is given a gold badge that certifies him as an official conscience. That's how the story ends. Woo! All right, we did it. Yep, that's it. That's it. This story, in my opinion, spoiler, if you haven't seen it in the last 60 years, then you probably, 80 years? Holy crap. Did I just think that it was 2000 in my brain? Did I shoot all the way back to 2000? Whoa. Weird things happen. This story, in my opinion, explains life and the life of a Christian in a way that no other story does. Like Pinocchio, our quest and our desire, right? And you think even culturally speaking, is to become real boys and girls. To become authentic. That's why we're all here, right? We're here because we want to be real. We want to be authentic. And this quest for authenticity and for becoming real and being real, I think it actually permeates pretty much everything that we see in the culture, everything that takes up our minds, and everything that takes our attention these days. Even contemporary pop psychology points out authenticity as a value that we need to consistently embrace. Right? Are you familiar with the works of Brene Brown? Anybody? Mm-hmm. So her work on vulnerability and shame is fantastic, right? And a lot of the key, the chief cornerstone to this is this idea of being authentic, being true, being real. And this fits in with her idea of wholehearted living. And I don't think that this is bad, right? I don't think that being authentic is kind of a bad thing as we kind of culturally even think about it. But I think that maybe in some ways it's a little incomplete, right? The idea of just speak your truth and you do you and whatever. These are kind of the slogans that were sold today, right? About what it means to be real and what it means to be authentic. But I want to make sure that we we don't vilify the idea of cultural authenticity, kind of how we're speaking about it, because there are a lot of fake things out there. And I do think that we want to make sure that we're pursuing the real. But I do think that our understanding of authenticity can be a slippery slope that leads us away from being truly authentic human beings. In other words, when I hear people use the word authentic in culture today, I can't help but think of a line from another classic movie. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. The theme has shown up all over the place in some of the interviews I've done for a podcast that I want to shamelessly plug with you all, called We Are Orthodoxy. And I've interviewed about 40 young adults now at this point, and this idea of authenticity keeps showing up over and over and over again. People want to be true to themselves. People want to be authentic. They want to actually do with what they say is inside of them. And this is the ongoing question that I think a lot of people have. And even as teenagers, I don't know if you guys remember, the big teenager question is, who am I? Who am I really? Right? Am I a surfer kid, or am I a punk rocker, or am I a drama geek, or what am I, a band nerd? What am I? Who am I? This is the question. And to this end, this is why teenagers try on all those different masks. I mean, I remember going through a phase in my life where I was a huge fan of the band Korn. Anybody remember that band? Yeah. They're not good. They really aren't. But I bought I had Puma pants and shoes, and then I decided I didn't like that anymore, and then I really got into a band called New Found Glory. Anyone? New Found Glory? Yep. Still love them. They also are really not good, but they're so good in all the right ways. But then I started wearing Dickie shorts and Chuck Taylor shoes and all of this kind of stuff, because I was trying to fit into some sort of understanding of who I was. And I think probably all of us did something similar in our teenage years. That's normal. It's pretty normal development. But I also did a lot of theater too. And then I wanted to be a beach bum, but I also I hate the beach. I do. It's, to quote Anakin Skywalker, just sand everywhere. I hate the sand. It gets everywhere. It's so coarse. It's horrible. But I still wear sandals every chance I get. That's important to me. But as it turns out, right, this adolescent quest for identity, for authenticity, this isn't something that just ends for us when we turn 18. This is something I think that is stretched far into young adulthood now, and I think a lot of it, the reason that you guys are here is because you're probably grappling with this question yourself. This question is still permeating so much of what we do. Again, we talked about this. There's these cultural sayings of you got to live your truth. No offense, I'm just telling it like it is. You do you, boo. Right? You do you is such an interesting phrase. You do you. And this is the tagline of our time. There are very few billboards in Phoenix, Arizona. 4 of the 7 that I can think of say you do you on them. Yes. Other ones advertise a place called Salad and Go, and that one makes me happy. But this is the tagline for what philosopher Charles Taylor has dubbed the age of authenticity. In the age of authenticity, the goal of life is simply human flourishing, being the best possible version of you that you can possibly be. But the kind of the framework within which we're supposed to pursue this idea of flourishing is in what he calls expressive individualism. It's not the Christian understanding of what it means to flourish as a human being. It's not some sort of transcendent value, right? It's all about what you feel is most authentically you, and then you being able to project that into the world. That is expressive individualism. And everyone is entitled to do that, right? Expressive individualism is our social imaginary that says it is the understanding that each of us has his or her own way of realizing our humanity. And it's important to find and to live out one's own way of being human as against surrendering to conformity to a model that's imposed from the outside. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. This is why oftentimes when you hear people say oh, they were just spewing what they were taught, or they were, you know this idea of like you got to own your faith? Like this is a thing that people say, right? Like you have to own your faith, even in Christian places. We talk about this because we're born into this, like, it's just everywhere now. It's the water that we swim in, that like you have to do you. Like if you're going to be a Christian, then it has to be true because for you, like you have to own it. It can't just be true because it's axiomatically true, right? Does that make sense? Same thing with like, just regurgitating anything that maybe your parents have taught you. We somehow think that this is like wrong culturally. Conformity is unethical in the age of authenticity. Simply just being like somebody else is somehow wrong, right? Like everyone is supposed to be like their own person and unique and have their own social media account on which they share all of their opinions that nobody cares about. They post all of the food that they're eating. Like this is what it's all about. You projecting this image to the world, and everywhere we go are just these spaces of mutual display where we all get to like show off our feathers, right? And we all want everyone to see how pretty our feathers are. And so we've developed this weird sense of self-consciousness. Like we're always conscious of ourself doing a thing. We're very rarely just doing the thing, right? Here's this, look at me at the Eiffel Tower, right? Instead of just being at the Eiffel Tower, it's like I got to somehow document every single thing that I do. And it's all over the place. You know, like think about what's going to happen like 500 years from now when like archaeologists are like looking through records. They're going to be like, wow, look at this generation. Never has one generation of people so accurately documented how little they've done. Like, that's really what this is going to be like. They're going to be like, these people were nuts. Like, oh, bacon and eggs again. Bacon and eggs again. This person really likes breakfast food. How bizarre. But all of these things, right, these places of mutual display, our self-definition, the way that we project ourselves, the way that we try to look to express who we are, this has become the all-consuming project of our time. I think in a way, like unlike anything else, we're far more concerned with the kind of like the identity that we want to construct and project. All right. Well, that was exciting. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You do you, girl. You do you. But everything that we do and everything that we say builds meaning in this really public self that we've created, that we're curating. And I think it is this self-definition as an all-consuming project that makes us highly susceptible to a consumer culture. It has to. Because big corporations know that you're trying to figure out who you are. And they want to sell you an identity. They want to sell you your personhood. They are interested in giving you language to express on social media your so-called authentic self. And we believe that this is freedom. That we're free to buy whatever we want, that we're free to be anthropology shoppers or Urban Outfitters. Is Urban Outfitter a thing?
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
But like certain kinds of people shop at these kinds of shops, right? Like, I shop at Target. You do? I shop at whatever. I mean, I don't know. It's weird. Like we begin to put identities around the things that we buy and consume. It's very strange. And the great lie and the great promise of consumerism is that you get to choose who you are. Or at least it has to feel chosen. Right? That's the great lie and promise of consumerism. Philosopher James Smith says that we need to consider the illusion here of nonconformity. Consider the illusion of nonconformity in the suburban skater kid whose mom buys him a $150 board emblazoned with anarchy symbols. Consider the irony there. Right? $150, bored with anarchy. Oh, he's such a nonconformist, just like all the other anarchists. Look at them all being nonconformists together at the same time in the same place. These identities are ones that we construct in our age of authenticity, and they often come to replace our other identities, especially collective identities like citizenship or even religious affiliation. We tend to identify far more like immediately with certain styles of music, certain product preferences, whether you're a Trekkie or a Star Wars fan. And often these things take a larger place in our self-identity than our identity as Americans or Canadians or as Christians. They take a larger place in our mental map. Because being American or Canadian, or in some cases Christian, isn't something that you've chosen. So therefore, it's not really a part of who you are. Does that make sense? And this is the cultural moment that we're in. That you get to choose who you are. And it's in this condition, then, that the soft relativism of our time acts as the ethical base of our slogan and authenticity. You do you. Who am I to judge? If we all get to choose our own way forward, if we all get to do I do me and you do you and we do us, then who am I? Who am I to judge? And unto itself, I actually don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. Right? You do you and I'll do me. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Because I think it actually in some ways could make the world more peaceful. If we just kind of let people be people. Right? If we are more concerned with governing how we live our own lives, as opposed to trying to control and dominate how other people live theirs. Sort of like keeping your eyes on your own plate during Lent. Keeping your eyes on your own plate during a fasting season, right? Like you keep the fast. Don't worry about your brother, right? Worry about yourself here. So in some sense, I think that there is a real value to you do you. And there's some really destructive patterns of thought that it gets us into. So, for example, with an ethic of authenticity here, the only real virtue in our time is tolerance. It's the only real virtue. Just being able to tolerate other people, to allow one another to live out each other's paths for authenticity, as long as that path doesn't interfere with anybody else's path. Right? We all just get to tolerate one another, and it'll be fine. But the flip side of this leaves us with the only real sin of our time, which is intolerance, or trying to hinder somebody from authentic self-expression, which has become their right. That's the only real sin of our age. In the age of authenticity, you can't get away from the reality that you get to choose all sorts of things that you want to be and believe. There are many options, and Orthodox Christianity is just one among many, many, many options. We even have a phrase that expresses this. As I've said, you have to own your faith. At the center of authenticity is the ability, the power, and the mandate. You must choose for yourself. Otherwise, you would be inauthentic. If somebody else chose for you, that'd be conformist and inauthentic. So you need to choose for you. You have to. Otherwise, you're immoral. In the age of authenticity, one has to choose for oneself to believe in Orthodox Christianity. But this hasn't always been true, right? Like even as recently as 500 years ago, people could have been burned at the stake as heretics for not believing the same thing that their culture believed. This was a thing. I mean, I'm glad we don't do this anymore. Don't mishear me. I don't think we should start burning heretics. Like that'd be a move backwards, for sure. But there's no room for this in our modern sensibilities because religious belief no longer carries societal implications. It's simply an individual pursuit. Buying into something just because everyone else does it is actually wrong now. Culturally speaking, you can even see this happen when someone's favorite band becomes super popular. And suddenly everybody likes this band. And what's the thing that person who's that jerk that they always say? They're like,
I liked them before they were.
They sold out. I liked them before. Right? The selling out means that they are being what? Inauthentic. That's the sin. Right? You guys are the posers. I am the real fan.
The real deal.
You seeing how this becomes this is the cornerstone. This is the virtue. This is the ethic. And it's almost inescapable. Everywhere we turn, this is the kind of thing that people are doing. And we do it too. We totally do it. It might be more useful to say, right, that now what stands at the center of the age of authenticity is a new kind of anthropology, a new understanding of what it means to be human. In the age of authenticity, you are your desires. You are your wants. You are your interests. And it's your right to pursue them as much as you want. That's what it means to live in the age of authenticity. So at its core, this sort of expressive individualism, this preoccupation with self-identity and being authentic, all comes down to a matter of being able to put your most real desires on display. That's what it's all about. That's what the age of authenticity really comes down to. And the thing is, often, we actually tend to believe that this is true. That what it means to be real, what it means to be authentic, means that we're free to do what we want. That's what we think. To be able to have anything that we desire, to be able to follow all of our interests, we think that it means to be real, just like Pinocchio. To smoke, to drink, to gamble, to vandalize. This is how he thinks that this is what it means to exercise freedom. Right? To be a dancing marionette. That's what he thinks is his freedom. But Pinocchio isn't real. He's not real. He isn't an authentic boy. He's made in the image of one. But he's being invited to become one. To become authentic. To become real. He doesn't have flesh. He doesn't have bones. He doesn't even have his own conscience. He has a cricket. He simply bears the image of a real boy, but not the likeness to one. In reality, he is an animated puppet who has been invited into life. And he is taken in by Stromboli, the puppet master, and is made the star of a show. Look, a puppet who can dance without strings. Look at him. He's the star. Look at him dancing on that stage without strings, like a puppet. But when he wants to go home to his father, when Pinocchio wants to actually exercise freedom, what happens? He's thrown in a cage. He can't go back to his father. He wants to be free, and instead has become enslaved. He's become enslaved under the pretense of Stromboli celebrating his uniqueness. It's so sinister. Isn't it sinister? A stringless dancing puppet. And Pinocchio eats it up. I'm the star of the show. Putting all of his uniqueness on display. But in reality, who's the one laughing all the way to the bank? Stromboli. Stromboli is the one who takes all of the money and enslaves Pinocchio as he celebrates his own uniqueness. Y'all, we are Pinocchio. We've literally been sold the idea that the purpose of our life is to be happy and to feel good about ourselves. In the cold hard light of American individualism, authenticity means that you are what you most deeply want. In fact, and I've said it at the beginning, that this is the exact premise upon which all American politics rests. This is it. You are what you want. You are your interests. Which is why, frankly, I'm not interested in either side. Because I don't believe that we are our interests. Andy Root says that the liberal left rests on the assertion that you are your interests by saying that it's your choice to be pregnant or to terminate the pregnancy. It's your choice to marry whomever you'd like, and no one should be opposed. Conservatives are also deeply wed to this individualism, however, believing that no government program or tax law should be able to thwart your individual interest. You should be able to spend your money how you want, even if it's on buying a handgun to take into a bar. The American political system is so fiercely divided because ultimately both groups are so similar, resting their feet in the warm, mucky waters of expressive individualism. That's why no one can get along. See what I'm saying here? Now, the purpose and the scope of this talk and this weekend is not to make comments about politics, but rather to point out that our desires and interests are the very backbone of what we think that it means to be authentic in our contemporary moment. That's it. The entire American economy depends on this sort of secular anthropology. We'll call it a secular anthropology. The best consumer is the one who knows what he or she wants, because he or she is then clear about their particular interests. And these wants and interests are not just about good products, but rather get tied to a very real interpretation of what kind of person you are. It used to be that we bought objects based on what the product did, how good of a thing it was, right? Now, we buy them based on what they mean. For example, I don't know if any of you remember this, but a few years ago, there was a series of ads that compared Macs and PCs. Do you remember these? I'm a Mac. I'm a PC. For those of you who don't know what this was, there was, what was his name? Justin Long. Justin Long, right? Who's kind of like the hipster, young, fun, chill actor of the time, right? He would come out in his like jeans and t-shirt, just kind of like walk out and be like, I'm a Mac, right? And then John Hodgman would come out in his like button up and stuffy looking suit or whatever, and he'd be like, and I'm a PC. And they would just go back and forth, kind of saying all these things, and they would compare one machine to the other. But the overall premise of the commercial was clear, right? PCs are unattractive nerds, and Macs are young, creative, attractive, and lucky. God forbid that you're a PC. You want to be a Mac. With a Mac in front of you, there's no mistake that you are a hip youngster. You are a tortured, misunderstood artist, and your only problem is that you didn't have the right medium to express yourself. This is why you need a Mac. It's not just about what the machine does. It's about what it means to have a Mac. Indeed, it's about what it means to be a Mac. This is the language. I am a Mac. What? Ultimately, companies and products are oriented to feed your sense of self-identity. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to help you see yourself as a particular kind of person, to define yourself within the age of authenticity. They're not just selling you products. They're selling you an image. And they're selling you an image of who you are and of who you want to be. Consider the shopping mall for just one moment, right? It's the most religious space of our time, for sure. I wish I had a picture of one. But imagine it with its arched ceilings and big open spaces. They're clearly modeled after medieval European cathedrals, right? With this big open common space. And if you really think about your experience in the mall, first of all, it's impossible to get into the mall. Nobody just goes to the mall for, like, swings by there, right? I'm just going to stop by the mall on the way home. It's like, no, you're going to the mall forever. Like, you live there. You have to walk through the department stores, right, to get into the actual main worship space. And as you get in there, you may notice that there are no lateral windows to the outside world at all, inviting you to lay aside all earthly care. The only windows in the space are up to the skies, making you feel that this is truly a transcendent experience, blessed by the heavens. And if you look to the sides, you'll notice all the different chapels devoted to all the particular cults. And you will see adorning each entrance to the chapel icons of those who represent the good life of this particular cult. And so you then journey into the chapel, and you decide to search the racks for some sort of sacrament, something in there, because you look at those saints, and you know, like, I'm not quite like them. But if at least I could dress like them, then maybe I'd have a chance. And so you search the racks, you find your sacrament, you bring it to the altar where the priest stands behind, you give them your offering. They give you the sacrament in return. They give you one final benediction. And they send you on your way back into the main worship space, where you are then free to go into all the other chapels and take the sacraments there. And then you go home with your sacrament, and you love your sacrament for roughly a week. And then next week, you have to go back to the holy site and find yourself another sacrament. Do you see what I'm saying here? They're selling you an image. This is the whole thing with marketers are genius. They're not going for your head. They are going for your heart. They are showing you in images like, look at this person who's so beautiful and gorgeous, and look at these abs. Have you seen these abs? These don't look like your abs. But you could have just, they're wearing jeans, but you can't really see the jeans because they're out of the picture, but you can tell they're jeans because of this little part right here. So go buy those jeans, and then you'll be like them. This operates on the premise of of some sort of redemption narrative. You are broken. You don't look like her. Right? You guys remember these Old Spice commercials? Like, hello, Is your man an Old Spice man? Does he look like me? No. Could he smell like me? Yes. And like that's the whole thing. It's a sacramental theology. It's sacramental theology. Your man doesn't look like me, and he can't look like me, but he could smell like me. He could participate in me. That's sacramental theology. And it's the thing that the marketers are sending to you. They're selling it to you. Literally. They're literally selling it to you. And remember this anarchist skater kid. Anarchism is actually a legitimate political philosophy. But that's not what's being promoted here. Right? What's being promoted here is this communal philosophy that is legitimate. I'm not saying that I believe it, but it's a legitimate theory. But it's being sold as childish individualism. Selling these suburban kids this image of nonconformity about being the kind of guy who doesn't look like he gives a crap about anything, except looking like the kind of guy who doesn't give a crap about anything. This is so bizarre. Bumper stickers. Can we talk about bumper stickers? Bumper stickers are weird. They exist for no other reason than to say, this is who I am. I saw a Jeep the other day that was littered with bumper stickers that swore devotion to Doctor Who and Star Wars and Harry Potter, and I was excited by this, generally speaking. Then prominently displayed on the spare wheel jacket were the words that said, not my husband's Jeep. I was like, okay, there's something that this woman wants me to know about her, right? I'm the kind of woman who drives a Jeep. I'm the kind of woman who likes Doctor Who and Star Wars and Harry Potter. She wanted me to know her interests. And somehow the idea was that was me supposed to have, to know who she is. Her interests are supposed to tell me something about her. But I don't know this woman. I don't have a relationship with her. But bumper stickers exist for no other reason than to project images of ourselves. I also saw a truck the other day with a huge, and I mean huge, enormous. The words I'm using do not convey the magnitude of what I'm about to describe to you. But it was a giant skeletal hand with the middle finger up, exaggeratedly on the back window of this cab. I mean, it was enormous. And I wasn't even offended. When I saw it, I just started laughing. And I laughed because it was all too clear to me what the driver of this truck wanted me to know about him. You know what I mean? But again, it's so bizarre because we wrap our identity around these images of ourselves, but I don't know anything about that guy. I don't know if he has kids. I don't know what he's afraid of. Nothing. I know nothing about his person. And yet, through bumper stickers, I know a whole lot about him. Right? In some sense, I know exactly how he wants me to know him, how he wants to be seen. And this bumper sticker culture that we live in is so interesting because it promises self-identity without anything personal. There's no personhood to it. There's just these images. I don't know who they are, but I'm supposed to take that as them being authentic? Is that authenticity? Skeletal middle fingers? Like, oh, wow, I feel so close to you. I feel like I really know you. Is that how I'm supposed to feel? And I think there's no greater space of mutual display than that of social media. Because we live in such strange times, so weird, where every single person gets to be the star of their own puppet show. Every single person gets to be center stage in Stromboli's puppet show. Everyone. Social media would have us believe that to be human is to express yourself. We get to dance and sing as if we're free, but in reality, we're only free to express ourselves in this cultural moment to the extent that we participate in a consumer market that sells us an image of the kind of people that we want to be. And in turn, we then start selling that image to one another. Look at the kind of person I am. We not only buy that image from people, we then try to make other people think that that's who we are. And the self of social media, and we all know it, is an inherently curated self. It's carefully picked and chosen. There is nothing authentic about social media. We all know it. And yet we all look at it and go like, oh, look what they're doing. They're so much cooler than I. They're so much prettier than me. They're so much smarter. Oh, look at how much fun they get to have. And it's like, it's ridiculous. And we all do it. And it's insane. It is actually insane that we look at social media knowing that we're being lied to, or at least having parts of it curated. And we believe it. And because we do it. It's craziness. Destroying the personal social media promises a lot but delivers a little. Never will we Sorry, I lost my place here. So we look at each other's social medias and we see projections of the good life that we can't help but be wounded by. We're wounded with envy. We see particular moments in people's lives, and they're usually sexy, hip moments. People doing fun things that defy the drabness of our own lives. But we don't know what kind of fights they have with their wife. We don't know what kind of debt they're in. We don't know anything except for what's being projected. What this emphasizes to me, again, is that we are not real. We're not real. We're always curating ourselves. We're expressing our interests. And it's the expression that is deeply divorced from the personal. It is not freedom. It is slavery. Yes, it is true that I might be someone who likes Star Wars. That is a part of me. I like Star Wars. But Disney is the Stromboli that is laughing all the way to the bank the moment I start buying bumper stickers to declare that this is not just part of what I like, but is actually part of who I am. The joke's on me. So while I may be beginning to express myself, I am actually a captive. I am a slave to Stromboli, or in this case, to Disney, the corporation that wants to take my freedom and to use it to profit. In truth, I'm not being real. I'm still just a puppet, dancing with invisible strings, tied to companies and corporations that take my money while I believe that I am actually on center stage of my life. When you are your desires, you are not free. You are a slave. You are the dancing marionette of Stromboli's show. He locks you up, he takes away your freedom, and he only intends to benefit from your uniqueness. That is the great lie and promise of our time. That your freedom is to be used to express yourself however you want. You do you. You are your desires. Just give in to your desires. But think about it, like if you have to give in to every single one of your desires, that is a life of slavery. You have to do it. You have to go get those chips right now. You have to, it's not freedom. It's absolutely not freedom, but we think that it is. God help us. How much time, energy, and money we've wasted to build these falsely constructed selves. How much? But guys, this expressive individualism isn't limited just to our secular consumerism or to our politics. There's also, I think, a religious consumerism in polity that we buy into as well, because I think we do the same thing even within Orthodoxy. We have our own culture, which we use to try to identify ourselves. There's this self-identifying undertone to how we live in our Orthodoxy, which I think actually amounts to an abuse of our tradition. When at the office at the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, we used to make videos called Be the Bee and The Trench. We put them on YouTube. We would frequently get comments on our YouTube channel that said that if we really, really wanted these videos to be Orthodox, then the kind of music that we should put in the background is Byzantine chant. Awesome. That would be great, guys. That would be really, really nice. Except for one problem. Chant isn't background music.
You're supposed to listen to it.
It's prayer. Yeah, it's the prayer of the church. When we have these prayer ropes, which we often simply use as bracelets, because they help us identify ourselves as Orthodox. By the way, the longer the prayer rope, the more pious you are. If we want to advertise something as Orthodox, we may slap an icon on it or put a cross. And so we use the symbols of our faith as logos. And it kills me when I see icons on bulletins or on t-shirts. If Christ's face is on a shirt, what am I supposed to do with that? And you're wearing it. Do I venerate it? that's what they're for, right? Like they're for prayer. Do I take my shirt off and put it in the dirty laundry with all the other dirty clothes? Do I leave it on the floor? What do I do with a shirt with an icon of Jesus' face on it? Doesn't that just sort of desensitize me to his face? Don't I get like accustomed to it in a way that maybe is not good? Or icons on bulletins. I mean, how many icons have we thrown away because they've been on church bulletins? More or less than the iconoclasts? I mean, I really wonder if you could say that perhaps we're more iconoclastic than the iconoclasts. Sure, maybe we burn them because that's what we're supposed to do, but doesn't it say something that we're printing images of the Lord and his saints with the express intent of burning them when we're done? That says something to me about our hearts. We've become cold. Maybe we're more interested in appearing to be authentically Orthodox than we are in actually being Orthodox Christians. In fact, we even have our own set of bumper stickers that are intended to express who we are. We have bumper stickers that proudly proclaim that we are the ancient faith. We have things that say proclaiming the truth since AD 33, which is hilarious because that bumper sticker used to read telling the truth since AD 33, which makes it sound like we were lying until AD 33, which I love. We also have ones that say Orthodox Christianity, 2,000 years, right? We also have ones that say honk 40 times if you're Orthodox. I like that one because it says, I'm Orthodox, but I also like to party. I'm not a square. I'm not a PC. We use these bumper stickers to express what kind of people we are, what we're interested in. And again, even though these ideas are religiously codified, they're still just authentic expressions of ourself. And that's it. This is also the reason I think that we can tend to have such ecclesial pride, by the way, especially for any converts in the room, people who became Orthodox. Yeah, I'm one of them. By the way, you're all converts. We'll talk about that some other time. But we're all converts. So, for those of us who came from systems like Protestantism, however, I think it's very easy for us to look back at Protestants and to make fun of what they do. You know, we can believe that we're better than them because we have the true faith. We believe that we found it, and so we slap a bumper sticker on our car and should be patted on the back for finding our way to the authentic expression of Christianity. Following our own desires and interests, we still are like Pinocchio. We take a one-way ticket to Pleasure Island, which is a place intended to make us feel good about ourselves and who we are. And we do this through all kinds of means, whether it's religion or not. We use drugs to have some sort of authentic spiritual experience. We use clothes or cars to portray ourselves as a certain kind of person with access to all kinds of cool stuff. Or we even use our religion to feed our obsession with the pleasure of being Orthodox and more informed than those silly Protestants. We're constantly navigating what it means to live on Pleasure Island, which is a place where all of our most base desires are available to us. Desires, wants, and interests that we're tricked into believing are authentic expressions of who we are. You've been tricked into believing that you are what you want. You've been tricked into believing that you are your interests, that you are your desires. But like Pinocchio, we soon realize that following our most base desires doesn't actually make us into real boys and girls. Instead, we just make asses out of ourselves. By following every one of our desires, we just make ourselves look like a bunch of jackasses. Do you realize how deep and profound the story of Pinocchio is? It's so intense. You guys, it's slavery. Your identity has been commoditized, and it's been sold to you. Consumerism is a never-ending game that keeps you enslaved. I mean, let's talk about technology for just a second here. Anyone have an iPhone 11 Pro or whatever the new thing is? Let me ask you a question. Do you really think that that's the latest technology that there is?
Well, it won't be the latest for long.
It's still not. It's just the one that they're selling to you. They've already got probably the next 15 designs. You know, there's no way that you have the cutting edge on technology. The whole premise of this whole thing is that what you have in your pocket is going to grow old And when it grows old, there'll be something else that's more magnificent for you, waiting for you already, right? They already have it somewhere. The idea is that companies want to make you a brand loyalist. They want to sell you a product that you will have to replace eventually. You'll have to. If for no other reason than because you want to be the one with the coolest, newest one. Like, people line up year after year when the new iPhone people camp out. It's insane to me. Like, we can't just wait for like a day or like order it on like Mac.com or Amazon. They sell them on Amazon? I don't even know. I don't know. Yeah, who knows? Come on, you're a cloud archaeologist. What are you again? Who knows what? I don't know what it is. Architect.
They want it to be their brand, so it's on their site.
There you go.
They will sell Apple names.
There you go. But there's got to be a way, right? Like, other than camping out, to be the first. It's important to be the first person with the new iPhone, I guess. This is a thing. This is where we've arrived as a culture. They keep it coming back for whatever they release because this is supposedly an expression of your authenticity and your freedom. It's crazy. The same goes for fashion. Do you realize that fashion is basically planned obsolescence for clothes? Wherever you look, everything's wanting to make you a slave. The entire age of authenticity in our contemporary moment is geared around making sure that you get to choose any belief, object, or whatever you desire to express yourself. That is it. And the Strombolis who own these things, they don't care about you. They don't care. They don't care about you. They want your money, and that's it. They are ruthless slave masters. So how do we get here? Well, ultimately, I think that if we're going to understand this idea for authenticity, this quest for authenticity, then we need to look at a word that church people keep using that keeps them up at night. There's a word that we're all afraid of. It's the big bad wolf. Secularism. Secularism is a big bad word that many of us are scared of. The secular world, right? We believe that it's knocking at the door and it threatens to take away our faith, that it threatens to destroy our religious freedom, and is going to force the church to have gay weddings. In reality, however, I only have one thought when I hear people use the word secularism. And at the risk of repeating myself, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. Generally, when people use the word secular, right, they use it to describe an institution or a person or something that overall is just not religious, non-religiosity. And as a part of this, there was this idea called secularization theory, which believed that as a society became more and more educated and informed over time, religion would disappear, right? So the more educated you become, the less you have a need for religion. And while I think there has been a clear decline in religious participation, I don't even think that this is necessarily the most haunting aspect of our secular age today. Because there's two other important characteristics of the secular age. One is this idea that we can no longer speak of anything as being just entirely true, right? That's one of the things. Nothing can be said as being totally true. And secondly, and I think what's even more haunting in some ways, is the fact that our world has become slowly but surely disenchanted. And by that, what I mean is that we have been flattened, our world has been flattened, and we've been enclosed in what Charles Taylor calls the immanent frame. We've unhooked creation from its creator, and so rather than speaking of creation, we look outside and we see the trees and the rivers, we talk about it as though it were called nature. We no longer even have this kind of imaginary that creation is connected to someone who's made it. It's just nature, right? In this immanent frame, the natural world of the things that we can see, taste, and touch, all of thisness, the immanent frame cannot be penetrated by the divine. We have lost the capacity to imagine a life that is beyond the limits of human flourishing. We have lost all ability to imagine something like the transformation of the human person. All we can talk about is living our best life now. But the idea of someone being transformed or transfigured, we have no space for this in our cultural mind. There's no way. So modern psychology speaks of recovery and healing, right? And I'm a therapist, and people come to me saying that they want skills, they want coping strategies, but never has someone ever come to me said, I want to be made new. I want to be changed. I want to be transformed. I want to be transfigured. No one has ever come into my office saying those words. I want to be made into someone new. No. Because the idea of transformation or transfiguration is unimaginable to us because we cannot transform or transfigure ourselves. It's something that has to be done to us. We must be acted upon in order to be transformed. After all, it's only the blue fairy who can turn Pinocchio into a real boy. He can't make himself a real boy. The blue fairy has to do it. But we don't believe in fairies anymore. We flattened it. We're all about trying to make ourselves into real boys and girls. But can we do it? Can Pinocchio make himself into a real boy? No. And honestly, I think this is the real tragedy of our secular age, that we have lost the capacity to imagine a transformed life where God can take us in his hands as animated puppets and make us into real boys and girls. This is the tragedy of our time, that we've closed him out of our lives. We've entered this flattened world as we are, born with a particular set of medical and psychological predispositions. We just are who we are. To quote the great modern philosopher, Lady Gaga, don't hide yourself in regret. Just love yourself and you're set. I'm on the right track. Baby, I was born this way. So if that's the case, then Pinocchio's most authentic self must be his stringless marionette life. Because that's how he was born. Right? Following that logic, he already is real. That's as real as it gets. You do you, Pinocchio. But that's not the promise of the blue fairy. She doesn't say, look, dude, you just do you. Okay? It is what it is. You're a stringless marionette. That's you. You should celebrate that about yourself. Go out and do you. No. She tells him, listen, dude, if you want to become real, if you wish to be made real, you've got to be brave, you've got to be truthful, and you've got to be selfless. That is how you will be made into an authentic person. That is how. If Pinocchio was made in our secular age, he would have been told that he was just fine as a puppet and all he needs to do is love himself. And while it's clear that Geppetto loves Pinocchio in all his wooden glory, the call on Pinocchio's life is much greater. He's not real, but he's invited to become real. So too, authenticity is not something that we possess, but rather is something that we obtain. It is not simply enough for us to be real, but rather we must wish to be made real. We can't just be authentic. We need to become authentic. Such a flattened understanding of the world affects everything in our lives, even our love for the church. Again, think about the fact of all the things that we boast about in Orthodoxy. They are firmly rooted in history, as if the only thing that makes us awesome is how freaking old we are. 2,000 years! Telling the truth since AD 33! Church of the Fathers! We've always been this way! Right? Like, these are the things that we kind of have as a cultural narrative in the church. But if we look back at the early church, if we look at the scriptures, if we look at the fathers and the saints of the church, we see that these are people who are not looking back at the history of orthodoxy to give it its credibility. What they are doing instead is looking toward the coming kingdom and awaiting the return of the king. That is what gives it its authenticity. That is what gives it its promise. The church's legitimacy is not born out of its history. It's born out of its future. It's born out of eternity. It's not the fact that we're old that makes us awesome. It's the fact that we are eternal. That's the power of the church. That's who we are. We are Christ's body on earth. Boom. And all the people said?
Amen.
Yeah. The early church, they were people of the age that was to come. You know? I mean, even in the creed, we see it, right? I look for the resurrection of the dead and the life of the age to come. Man. That's what they hinged on. That's what all their hope was based on. The resurrection of the dead. The life of the world to come. Right? I mean, even if you think about it, the book of Revelation, the final book of the scriptures, right, ends with Jesus promising that he's coming soon. And St. John says back what in response? Amen. Come, Lord Jesus. They wanted him to come back. Now, I mean, I don't know, like, I'd be kind of bummed out. I'd be like, dude, I've still got a lot of things. I haven't gone and seen, like, the Hobbit holes in New Zealand. There's a lot of things I want to do. I still haven't been to Prague. Really, Jesus? Like, I swore, by the way, when the Cubs won the World Series in 2016, I thought for sure that Jesus was going to come back during that, like, that break in the game. And I was like, this is it. This is it. Okay, here we go. This is it. Just because I figured he would want to mess with me. It says a lot about what I think about God, doesn't it? He's like, But the fathers were liturgical people, formed by the ins and outs of the liturgical life of the church, most primarily through the participation in the sacraments of the church. Every sacramental service begins with the same invocation. Blessed is the kingdom of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, now and forever, and unto the ages of ages. Amen. All this to say is that our identity as Orthodox Christians has never been rooted in the past. It has always been rooted in eternity. It has been rooted in the divine and the transcendent kingdom of God. And it is solely this kingdom that we must look to and dwell on if we are to be, and it is only toward this kingdom that we must look on as we dwell on the crucified and risen Christ, who shows us who we are and who we are to become. Our secular age, the disenchantment of the world, and the oppression of the immanent frame has been plundered of all possibility for transformation. And this affects everything for us, even the way that we perceive ourselves, the saints, and Christ himself. We all make mistakes, right? All of us. We all make mistakes. We all screw up. There's no need to pretend. No one in here is perfect. Raise your hand if you're perfect. No, you all suck. That's right. Everyone turn to the person next to you, tell them you suck. Say, I suck. That's okay. Yeah, great. It's right. We all suck. We all, yeah, tell them they suck too. You suck. But this is what I'm saying, is we all suck. All of us. All of us suck. We all do sucky stuff. But in our transformation perspectiveless time, we too easily dismiss our failings and our shortcomings. We too easily try to overlook them with a stupid phrase where we say things like, well, I'm only human. I'm only human. No! No. No. This is wrong. This is not our theology. Look at the saints. We look at the saints and we even look at them and we go like, well, you know, I could never be a saint. As if they were just like automatically born that way. We somehow think of them as like superheroes that like got doused in radiation, or like, and all of a sudden they were able to pray.
No, holy water.
They were doused in holy water, sorry. Bit by radioactive church cats. Sainthood, we believe, was for them, but it certainly isn't for us. But we can't speak this way or think this way of Christ's saints without it affecting our understanding of Jesus. We believe that he is fully man and fully God. And if we're honest, we might even look at his ability to go to the cross and to forgive his enemies while dying and too easily dismiss it and write it off saying things like, yeah, but he was God. Of course he could do that. And so we subtly give like a nod to an ancient heresy here, right? Saying that Jesus only appeared to be human. He was only human enough, but the reason that he was able to forgive his enemies was because he was God. And that's not really human. If we're going to be Orthodox, we need to realize that when we look at Jesus, we don't only see God. It's not just God that we see, but we do see him. But we also see what it means to actually be a real human being. Finally, for once, here, crucified, given for the world, there is the authentic human being. The human. It's not simply God that we look on. He is God. And he's man. He's human. Anthropos. When God makes the world in the very beginning, he makes all sorts of things. He makes the sky, the land, the animals. And then in Genesis 1, 26 through 27, God tells us what this whole thing is all about. It is there that he sets out to make human beings in his likeness. This is the whole project of God, to make human beings like himself. Y'all, if you want to know what it means to be authentically human, this is the answer. To be an authentic human means to be like God. That is what it means to be an authentic person. To be like God. Like Jesus, whom we see, who is the man, the human. Christ alone. He who is brave, truthful, and selfless. He shows us what it is to be human, what it is to be a human in the likeness of God, because he himself is that likeness. The blue fairy tells Pinocchio that it is only by being brave, truthful, and selfless that he might be made real. And so, in following Christ to his cross, we too must learn what it means to be brave, truthful, and selfless. If we wish to be like him, we need to follow him. Pinocchio is only afforded the chance to become a real boy after he enters the belly of the whale. And for those of us who've gone to Sunday school, this is probably a familiar image. The prophet Jonah, who is a type of Christ, at once represents fallen and sinful humanity, but also represents the Savior himself. In the belly of the whale, waiting there for almost certain death, Jonah is spit out after 3 days. So too, if we wish to be made real, then we must enter the belly of the beast. To go in there, we must die so that we may be brought to life. By his own death, Christ shows us what it means to be authentically human, to be brave, to be truthful, to be selfless, to be brave enough to let ourselves see ourselves for how we really are, to be truthful about who we are, to be selfless enough to live for someone else, to live for the other, to die for the other. Hear me out, friends. To be an authentic person is to become like God. It is to be deified. It is theosis. If we are to be real, we need to accept this. We need to accept that we are made for God, that we are made by God, and we are made to become like God. That is the only path toward authenticity, is to be truly human in his likeness. So to be real boys and girls, we must first know who this God is that we are supposed to be like. Yeah? Does that make sense? That follows pretty logically, doesn't it? And so this is how we're going to begin ourselves tomorrow in our quest towards authenticity. If we wish to know who we really are, we must know the Lord. We spend so much of our time trying to define ourselves as certain kinds of people, right? That's a waste of time. We got to be filled with the divine life to be transformed. So for Christians, we are only becoming real in as much as we're deified through our continual life of taking up the cross, following the Lord, knowing his love, and walking with him. And I, for one, am super excited for our process tomorrow, because I think that that is going to be a journey. And so I'll stop talking now. And I'm thankful for all of you. And that's it.